Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of Jacques Talk, a very unique setting today. A couple of old men in rocking chairs here today.
And a pumpkin.
And a pumpkin. Just beautiful autumn decorations here as Derron Daquano. Hi, Derron.
Boss, how are you? My new sports director.
That's right. I guess this is my first Jacques Talk as sports director. So
I'm honored.
Appreciate you bringing that up.
Sure.
Not a whole lot's changed. Woke up, felt the same.
You put your socks on one at a time down, your left leg and your left pant leg.
By the way, that's one of my, I hate that sports cliche. Like one team's an underdog and they're playing a giant, They put their pants on one leg at a time, just like us. I never really understood it. Hasn't really hit me like some others. Derron joins us today because Derron has worked at the station even longer than I have. How many years?
28.
28. The better part of 3 decades.
Longer than most of our employees have been living.
But we have some young pups in the station. Nothing wrong with that. We were both young at one point ourselves. They hired me when I was 24 and looked like I was 14. So.
I was 24 too.
Wow, how about that? Something to be said about that. The opposite of the rock stars that die at the age of 27, like Janis Joplin and
but they had talent.
Jimi Hendrix. They had talent. Jim Morrison. Derron has shot LSU football on the sidelines and at press conferences and getting off the bus. And how else do we shoot LSU? Practice?
Yeah, practice, press conferences, games, traveling, and traveling. This is the worst part.
We traveled to 4 games in
6 weeks.
The first 6 were away from Tiger Stadium.
Yes, all while trying to edit this thing throughout all that. Well, so it's been busy. Yeah,
so we're here today mostly to talk about Cecil versus the Diesel, a documentary. I guess Derron's been a part of other documentaries. I've never really done a documentary, meaning I've done stories that have been 5 minutes long and invested a lot of time and hours into, but nothing on this scale.
This is the longest I've ever done. 28 was the previous long, but yeah, this was, well, a whole minute got added the day before by somebody like you.
The new sports director got full of himself.
Got demanding.
Said we're going to add a minute.
But it was absolutely worth it.
Yeah, well, the last minute
of
the documentary is Cecil 26 years after the biggest game of his life against Auburn, in which he ran for 232 yards, returning to Tiger Stadium on the sideline as LSU's about to play Auburn after being through everything he's been through, including 13 and a half years in prison. So that was the original ending we had was in the church, which I felt was very good and uplifting. The music was spectacular, but this was a better ending.
Absolutely, 100%. I kind of doubted you at first, but you came through, of course.
So, yeah, this thing has been over 3 years in the making. Like, Derron shoots news during the week, and, I get whisked away for 3 months doing women's basketball. Then I get whisked away for 3 months doing baseball. And it was just a matter of carving out the pockets of time to get everything shot, to get all the groceries, right? You had to get all the groceries. Once you started cooking, you whipped up the meal pretty quickly.
Yeah, because it wasn't like, people may think we did this for 3 years. This is something we didn't do every day.
Right.
It lay dormant for like a year. We didn't touch anything because COVID, we couldn't go to Cecil's house. Then we were going to plan to go, and then something happened twice where we couldn't go, and then we went there twice. So, yeah, it wasn't all in one little
point A to point B.
No, there were a lot of
detours.
Curves. Like our West Virginia drive, yeah. Another long story.
We may have to touch upon that. Worst road trip we've ever made. West Virginia, 2011. We got up, I don't know what it was, 4 in the morning or whatever. We drive to New Orleans. We take a flight from New Orleans to Pittsburgh. We take a drive from Pittsburgh, and we gave 2 LSU fans
We basically picked up 2 hitchhikers on the way.
Hitchhikers.
Yeah.
You made that decision.
I did, but I kind of talked to them on the plane, and they were seniors at LSU, and they were going to make they were good. They were going to make every road trip that year, and they did. And then that last one was.
So we drive them to
West Virginia. We go to Morgantown. Yep. Dropped them off, and then never. The next time I saw them was at the championship game.
They were, the bad championship.
Yeah, that game.
So and then. our laptop broke. We couldn't edit, so we had the feedback raw.
Through somebody's sat truck. I don't even remember who it was.
Yeah, we had the feedback. This is before live views and stuff.
Yep.
The backpacks it.
Yep.
And that night we put in Morgantown. We put in the wrong.
We put in Morgantown, Ohio instead of Pennsylvania.
Uniontown was where we were staying.
We put in a completely different state, and we went an hour in the wrong direction.
Darren starts driving. His stomach gets sick.
I got car sick. I let you drive.
You threw up.
And then I threw up in the car.
Yeah.
It had an
and
odor.
those of you who have dealt with puke in the past know that as hard as you try to get the odor to go away, you ain't getting rid of that odor.
I had the window rolled down going out the window, but it didn't quite make it.
It's
not a proud moment.
Little debris left over that made it. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. That's my neighbor, Hal. Hey, Hal.
Hey, Hal.
Hal Dupree.
Nice guy.
Catholic high graduate.
Well,
went to Redemptorist. So there's
we'll hold that
oil
against
and water there.
It's all right.
But yeah, so
yeah, they probably had to burn that car after we gave it back. Remember, we got the cleaning lady products because it was in the cracks of the. Anyway.
And then leaving, we were going to Pittsburgh, and we took this long detour to get to Pittsburgh.
It was the old, like the Garmin GPS. They weren't on the phone back then. It was. We went along. We were like, we might not make it here.
Jeff Burrow, our Ponce de Leon, was not with us that day. If he was, he would have
called in sick.
He would have been very upset with our lack of.
And you remember who we took a picture with in the
airport,
Pittsburgh airport?
We met Wee Man.
Wee Man from Jackass. That was the highlight of my trip. Sad to say, but
LSU blew out West Virginia, and we interviewed Odell Beckham Jr.'s parents before the game. Odell Beckham Sr.
Mm-hmm.
And. I think we talked about it. He was due for a big play, and there was a 3rd and 1. Jared Lee faked it and threw across the middle, a little high, but Odell went and got it.
Yep.
Caught it, catch and run touchdown. I think that was his first big moment of his career.
Tyron had a big play.
Tyron had a lot of big plays, yeah, early on.
I remember a guy working from West Virginia. He was a photographer. He's like, "Who should I watch for?" So this Tyron Matthew guy's really good. You probably want to keep an eye on him. And he exploded.
I think there was that one play where he jumped the route, he knocked it up in the air.
He knocked it up, and
he caught it.
And he got down to the 1 yard line, 1 or 2 yard line. He didn't score, but yeah.
And then they completed a pass, and he ripped it out or punched it out or something.
Yeah.
I think Mo Claiborne ran back a punt or a kickoff 100 yards that night. Yeah, they blew him out. You told me that was the most profane student section
They
you've
were
ever seen.
tough.
Yeah.
Because Michael Cobble from 2 was shooting that game, and he wore a purple shirt. And when we were on that side, they would not let up. They just were on him the whole game. He took it in stride, but yeah, it was.
Yeah.
They were tough.
ESPN College Game Day was there. LSU was number 1. This was West Virginia. This was like their bring back the magic game, and I think it was 47-21 LSU won. So back to Cecil and the Diesel. It started when COVID hit. There was nothing going on, right? We had beautiful weather, but obviously there were no sporting events of any kind. The world shut down, so I started doing Zooms. I'd never done, I don't know how new Zoom is, but in the past, at least, I always thought you either interview somebody in person like this or you do a phoner. I never did the Zoom.
Everybody was doing it then because you really couldn't go to anybody's house. You couldn't, go to anybody in person, so that was the thing.
Yeah, and I think it's made a huge impact on businesses who realize they don't have to fly people out left and right.
Interviews, yeah.
Hotels and this and that. But I think I was doing a Zoom with Booger McFarland, and who played at LSU, of course, and now is a big shot on ESPN. And I just asked him in passing as we were recapping his LSU career. I said, I'll go with Cecil Collins. And he said, he's the best running back I've ever seen. And that struck me for a guy who played only 3.5 games basically at LSU and then half a season in the NFL when Booger played over a decade and part of 2 Super Bowls, I think. And then everyone else, and then a lot of other people with great accolades, Kevin Falk, Todd McClure, Ryan Clark.
All of them played at least a decade in the NFL, and all of them are saying this. So it's like, come on. Because, you hear people say, well, he only played 3 games, blah, 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 how could, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, when these guys are saying it, I'm going to listen to what they say because they know what it looks like.
Yeah, I'll take their opinion and coach's opinion
for sure.
Over, I don't want to sound arrogant,
armchair
but,
quarterbacks.
No name on YouTube with 2 subscribers. I'll take their opinion
right.
with a little more weight. And so that kind of started, and I'm trying to remember exactly. We just started shooting interviews, and we didn't know what it was.
We interviewed Cecil on Zoom.
Yes.
And I had 2 cameras set up because it was a big deal. It's Cecil Collins. Nobody, I don't think anybody talked to him before that. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then
I hadn't seen him on TV at least. Or
No.
him talking.
Yeah, and then we talked to him for so long, my GoPro overheated. It completely shut down. And then after it's over, I'm like, dude, this is more than just a little 2-minute story. This is incredible because he was an open book. He just laid it all out there. He was great.
And I think you said we got to go to.
We got to go to Houston, which that wasn't going to happen anytime soon. So we just kind of sat on that interview and waited.
And I think Cecil, and I don't blame him one bit, had some trepidation.
Absolutely.
And think about it. I mean, think about your own ego and things that hurt your ego. And for a guy to have to step in front of one of these and say, and fess up to the mistakes and what he lost. And
right. I mean, I'm uncomfortable doing this. I can't imagine him, you know, with all that he had gone
You're uncomfortable
through.
doing this?
I hate this. I like being back there.
Behind the camera, not in
yes.
front. Save that for Anchor Boy. But yeah, and he also had voiced, understandably, when people Google his name, the first thing they see are those
The mugshots.
mugshots.
Yep.
And not to pat ourselves on the back, but now when you search his name, our documentary pops up, and there's a current shot of his face,
yeah.
what he looks like now, what he's doing now, and whatnot. And so for 24 years, basically, since he went to prison, some people have had, you know, they made a judgment. It's out of sight, out of mind, hadn't thought about him, and now it's like, oh, wait, he's been out of prison for 10 years. This is what he's doing.
Right. Yeah, when we first went there, it was a little uncomfortable. I don't know how you felt, but he kind of was, he didn't trust it. He doesn't know us. Right. And I don't, you know, he's got this story he's going to tell. He doesn't really know us. It was amazing that we really got as far as we did. And he's, I remember putting the light up, because I put up a bunch of lights. The light's kind of bright. And I'm like, oh man, here we go. So I did a little pull it back or whatever.
He said, I don't want to talk about this.
I don't want to talk about prison. I don't want to talk about prison.
And then when the thing rolled, he talked about everything.
Then he just, everything.
I don't know if it was therapy that we were like, you know,
maybe he thought you were, you were Dr. Phil, but yeah, I mean, good for him, man. I think with the positive reaction that it's gotten and he's gotten, I know he's been getting calls from people he played with in 5th grade and all that kind of see him as like, yeah, you turned it around and you're doing good. And I think that's great for him and especially his wife too, who, by the way, can you imagine what she did? Met him in county prison, the county jail, all the way through when he was released, 13 and a half years, and missed 2 visitations. Yeah. It is unbelievable the impact she had on him.
Well, and that is the total opposite of a lot of stories you hear in the NFL where, you know, it's someone who's about the power and the limelight and all that excitement.
Right. She met him at his absolute lowest and didn't know who he was when she met him. By the way, the story of how they met, a couple of people asked me, well, how did they meet in jail? I'm like, he explained it and he didn't explain it right. She finally explained it, but it was just too convoluted
it would have ruined the pacing.
It would have slowed down. It's interesting, and she, I got distracted.
Just some friends passing by here in the neighborhood.
But she said she didn't know he played football. This wasn't in there, but she goes, "You're too small to play football." I was like, yeah.
Which is another thing that's striking, because when you watched him play, you almost got the sense that he was the size of like Leonard Fournette, or at least built physically.
Well, he always said those pads they wore were huge. They sat up here. But just looking at his face, he looked bigger. Like now, he's like tiny. Yeah. He's smaller than we are now. I mean, he's built, but he's not. Shape. He's very much in shape, but he's
more Trendon Holiday than.
He's under 200 pounds for sure. Because he said his playing weight was 205, which still is crazy to me. He looks like he's 235. Yeah. The way he's running over people and his agility and all that.
When he was at LSU, he had the bald head. His face was more full.
Full, yeah.
So it was about carving out the pockets of time to work on this. We went to Houston in 2022 in March, I believe. I was covering the Shriners Classic.
Yep.
Jay
Yep.
Johnson's first year with the baseball team, covering those games. You drove over and met me. As soon as we finished the interview, I went back to
cover the game.
And then you drove home.
And I'm driving home. I'm like, dude, that was incredible what we just got.
Yeah.
And that kind of, I'm like, all right, we're on our way now. Now we got to maybe reshoot some interviews that we did earlier and find some other people. And of course, you found everybody we needed.
Well, several of these interviews were shot in 2020.
Yep.
I think on the same day we shot Ryan Clark and Kevin Falk.
Yep, we did.
Because I remember, and Derek Benamsky, I love you. This is a funny story. Because COVID had just hit, and I contacted Kevin, and we were just kind of all over the place at that time.
Right.
You know, I was like, Kevin, can we do this interview? He said, yeah. So we go over there and we shoot the interview with Kevin, and then Derek calls me, and I guess rightfully was
because it was kind of locked down at that
with
point.
me that they had done some sort of codes or something that they typed in. The door opened and let us in, and he was going to have to recalculate and do some stuff. He was not happy with me that day. But yeah, we shot those too early. I shot I guess I did Mike Haywood on a Zoom.
Yes, definitely a Zoom.
Jerry DiNardo Zoom.
Yep.
So a lot of these interviews were done bang, bang, bang right off the bat.
Right, very early.
But we were missing the main character.
Yep.
Cecil.
Yeah, we had all those before Cecil. Right.
So we got Cecil, and then it was like, look, we need some more shots.
And it took a while to get Cecil too. It wasn't easy. And which was like, man, I don't think this is going to happen.
Yeah.
It was a lot, and it was in jeopardy, I thought. But
yeah, you voiced, and I agreed a couple times that, man.
And then he voiced some concerns too via text. It's like, I don't know. I think he's going to back out. You know what? His right to back out.
Sure.
It's his story.
Right.
But he came through, man, and I'm glad he did.
We went back in the summer of this past summer, 23.
Yeah.
And that's when we got the shots of the church, him in church, him playing with CJ, him playing video games.
Played video with CJ, but him playing football was a year prior.
That's
and
right.
you can see the growth of CJ just in that year.
Adults don't change that much in a year. Like, Ryan Clark looks the same today as he did 3 years ago. Kevin Falk the same. It's not like, wow, you shot that a long time ago. You can't tell.
Right.
But a kid.
Yeah, I thought people might find that kind of, but it's like you had to put that. I mean, you can't get around that.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, I was with you, and I kind of forgot. So that goes to show you.
Well, the first thing when he opened the door, his hair was cut. When we had him, he had longer hair, which whatever. It's not a big deal. He's a awesome kid, by the way. He is full of energy, and he's a really good kid.
And I mean this as a compliment. I laugh every time he pops up.
Absolutely.
You know, when he's running in the backyard, and he runs out of frame.
He's talking the whole time.
Right.
Yeah, he's funny. He's really funny. And I do the same thing with Cecil. I watch it, I edit it, and I start laughing all over again every time I see him make his comments. And that was the thing. I think I'm glad he showed his true personality, because like he said, when people Google it, they see that mugshot. You don't think that guy is the guy that's making jokes and laughing the whole time and stuff. I know his teammates knew that side of him, but I think the general public who don't know him, that just saw it from afar, doesn't know he's really funny. He's energy. Endless energy, like his son. They're like two in the same, So.
Well, I was talking to Jordy Collada about it, and he was talking about how everyone was great in it, but he thought that perhaps the person who was the best was Cecil.
Yeah.
Because of his personality. He's a great storyteller. He recounted everything.
He was the focus. He did. He had a great memory. Not a great memory how he met his wife, for whatever, but for everything else he did.
Because some football players, idiot savants like me who, when Derron and I go to a hotel and we get off the elevator and I'm supposed to turn right, I go left, or I'm supposed to go left and I turn right, or we go out to the parking lot and I forgot where we parked,
or the keys.
Whatever.
Yeah.
The whatever I do. I can remember this stuff like the back of my hand, and so, and a lot of football players that I talk to, they're like, I don't remember that.
Right.
I don't remember what happened. Yeah, I think it was a day game. I think
Right.
But in this case, his recount was.
Yeah, I think at one point he says, "Man, you know your stuff. You did your research." I said, "No, he didn't. He knew it already."
my research was back then looking at it a million times and
Right.
searing it into my brain. But let's see. So the storytelling, the people that were involved, and one thing too, I thought, so, you know, sometimes you have a story, you have a story idea, and you start pitching it to the people, and they're like, they give you a lukewarm response, and you're like, yeah, I don't guess this is going to go anywhere, or it's not going to be what I thought it was going to be.
Right.
It's going to be something shorter. And
Right.
but Ryan Clark told me all I needed to know, and the fact that Ryan Clark is on ESPN and at the highest level of broadcasting right now, and when you interview him, you can see it in his eyes and his expression that this is important to me and this is something that I need to talk about. It wasn't the old, why would I want to talk about a guy from 30 years ago that I played 3 games with? But I think he told us. Didn't he tell us you need to do this?
He did, and he said, he told you, he's like, usually I don't do anything but for ESPN or if it's promoting traction. But this was that important for me that you need to tell this story. He said that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and he was great.
Absolutely. There's so much of him that I couldn't use that was, yeah, he was really good.
Well, and not to give Derron any more work than he already did, but I think eventually there'll be like you put the movie out and there's a director's cut after. We've got some extras that we can throw up.
Sure.
Other pieces.
Because there was a huge life-changing incident that happened to him while he was in prison that I don't think anybody knows about but his family. And it was just, I had to be 37 minutes. And that part, for television purposes, and it was just, I'd love to fit it in, but I just couldn't.
Yeah. And there are other things like the 3rd and 2 versus Auburn that they threw the ball and they lost the game.
Which I've watched the game twice, logging the video, and that 3rd and 2 is not as late in the game as people think. They had another possession that they didn't score on. So,
yeah.
I mean, maybe they still should have run the ball. I'm not saying that, but it wasn't like it wasn't Damian Craig didn't get the ball and then go down and score. It wasn't the last thing,
I think it was 10 minutes in the 4th quarter.
Yeah, it was pretty early in the 4th.
It's not the way I had remembered it in the
Right,
stands
well,
either.
nobody does.
You know, and then there was another story that kind of became like folk legend that he trucked
Takeo Spikes, and he didn't.
Takeo Spikes.
It was number 25. I think Houston was his last name.
Okay.
Houston or Washington. And he trucked him, but Takeo was like right next to him, but he's not the one who got spiked. Because I looked and looked. I'm like, because a lot of people said that, and I didn't see it.
Yeah.
But
that was another thing that was kind of an urban legend. If somebody finds it and pops it up, we'll be happy to admit it we're wrong. But I think we looked pretty hard at the game copy and didn't see it.
No, I didn't see it.
So, yeah, we've got extras we can put in there. You and I talked about, too, that before we did this, we're like, look, this is a polarizing topic, and we're going to take some heat for it, probably one way or the other. And maybe we still will. I mean, it's fresh. It's only been out for a few days, and it's...
Well, you remember we both went to Steve Snyder, and it's like, we want to do this, and... He brought up, look, you got all, it was the Hurst Blackwell stuff was kind of going on around the time.
Hurst Blackwell,
going around, it's like, I don't know, people are going to blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, the climate.
But time passed a little bit or whatever, but I think when you see the whole story, yeah, he made mistakes, like you said, but it's where he is now is kind of the thing. You can't, I mean, he did 13 and a half years in prison.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, some people want their pound of flesh no matter what.
Yeah.
Which
but,
I don't want to get too deep, but if you're a Christian, you shouldn't think that way, right?
Right.
And
look, if you're the victim, if you're the parents of the victim, I have daughters, I get it, But,
we didn't glorify him. We didn't make
I
the
hope
effort
we
to
didn't.
glorify him.
I hope we didn't.
And that's not an insult to Cecil, his family, or whatever.
No.
This wasn't a pep rally.
I didn't want that.
We're storytellers, and we told a story.
As best we could without, we really didn't get into the details of what happened.
Right.
And I don't think we needed that. What's done is done. He paid his price. It's what he's doing now. It's kind of...
I think...
And we discussed it a lot. I'm like, should we do more on this? And, I think...
We included Sue Birney.
I think she was very important. Yeah. It would have been hard to do that without having the prosecutor. Right. And at the end, she says, look, I like him. I hope he gets his life together. And when he came back, he was going to go to jail again because of he violated probation in Louisiana. He was in district court or the courthouse. We in an interview with his brother. Again, another stuff we just couldn't put in, and they let him go because she said he just looked like he was contrite and he had gotten it together.
Yeah.
And they didn't have him go to jail again. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Which
he could have
is a
done
whole
more
other
time.
topic.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had people that have said, you went to prison for 13 and a half years? It was that long?
For burglary. You know, there's people who went for a whole lot worse stuff for a lot less time.
Yeah. But, and another fascinating thing about it is he never was bitter about it. Like, he's like, can you believe that I went to prison for that long for that?
Never once. Yeah, he was always,
I needed it.
I needed it. He said, I wouldn't be who I am if I didn't have it. That's just the way he had to go. Yeah.
I might be dead.
Yeah. It seems like he had good guys around him in there. He had some like mentors and that, you know,
Yeah.
that really helped him along the way.
And from what I understand, in years past, he had maybe talked about he wanted to move back to Baton Rouge. He wanted to come here, and maybe people who cared about him said, maybe that's not a good idea. The water isn't warm enough for that yet. And I think he still wants to do that, and so we'll see what happens there. I think that he could be a great resource to, you know, high school kids, FCA events where you talk about choices and making choices.
Absolutely.
And the two sides of the coin with Kevin Falk and Cecil Collins. And so in that way, I think he can be a great resource.
Absolutely. I think so.
Moving forward. And, you know, to hear all that, I'm trying to think what else we need to touch upon on this.
Oh, Gary Pickle. We got to give a shout out to Gary Pickle. He helped me so much with putting the videos into the screens. He did supers. He did all the, when you see the words pop up by the stadium, he did all that. And I would just come randomly during the day, hey, can you do this for me, blah, blah, blah. 10 minutes later, it's waiting for me. So big shout out to
and your
Gary
creativity on editing this thing. So this is a parallel only I could give. So like guitar players, all right? So I'm a huge Van Halen freak.
Really?
So over the years, Sammy Hagar and Eddie Van Halen, they get on stage, they play together. You know, they rock out different songs. You know, Sammy's a great guitarist. He's solid, you know. But Eddie Van Halen obviously was in another galaxy. So I feel like I'm pretty good on storytelling and editing, but Derron is Eddie Van Halen of editing. He's in another, or Randy Rhoads, since he's a big Ozzy fan. We'll go that route. Randy Rhoads of editing. But just the creativity, the opening shot, well, not the opening shot, but after the open, the VHS tape going into the machine, some kid's like, what's that?
Yeah, really. I didn't even think about that.
You know,
those three, I have those three monitors. I was cleaning out my dad's storeroom, and I'm like, I might need this one day. No clue what. So I brought them home, and my lovely wife is like, well, what are we doing with this? I'm like, I may use it for a story one day. So I put them on a shelf in the garage, and I don't know where that idea came from. I'm like, oh, I can put 3 plays in the thing. That's where Gary comes. I took video of those monitors, and then he put those video in of him playing in those monitors, because it would have taken me a week to do that with the editing system I'm using compared to what his is. Yeah. You know, he does marketing for us, Gary. So. And
not to bog you down in television talk, but the video back then was what we call 4:3 format.
Yeah.
Today we shoot in 16:9,
right,
which fills out the screen.
So it's why you see there'll be 2 sections of black on each side of some of the video. I kind of widened some and left some the same. It kind of went back and forth a little bit, but yeah. And the quality is not nearly as good back then either. There wasn't HD.
Well, I think anyone who watches understands if there's tracking, we call it, you know, with the little, the little.
On one of Cecil's interview was really bad, but you know, it kind of added to it.
I mean, and shout out to sports director Steve Schneider and everyone working in sports who kept an archive system. That was a gold mine. I mean,
look, found nothing in news, which tells you is a compliment to Steve Snyder, because there are just truckloads of video. Now, we never found the Auburn Raw video, which is
we used
upsetting.
ESPN copy.
We see what we shot, like the big plays, but as far as the warm-ups and after the game, all that, no clue where that is. I'm probably that tape got broken, is what I'm thinking, because they were old, they were taped, so they weren't like digital copies back then. But other than that, yeah, because of Steve, we had a lot of this, and then all his stand-ups and stuff like that, because he was all over it.
Yeah, I mean,
we found those interviews later. I didn't even know we had those. We were just scrolling and like, oh, whoa, this is after the Vanderbilt game. He was on crutches. I had no clue we had that.
well, it's one thing to have a bunch of talking heads say he was great at practice and he ran over people, and you don't see it. I mean, obviously we work in TV. When somebody says something, you need to show it too.
Right.
And having all that video of Cecil trucking people at practice and running away from them.
Right. We're there shooting practice, yeah. And you know Steve. I think what James Verrett probably was shooting, or Mark Winfrey. Shout out to those two guys too. And all this practice video, who you never, when you're shooting, you're like, this will be on the air tonight at 6 and it'll be done.
Right.
But you're talking, what, 26 years later?
I thought about the great Charlie Steiner, right? Who pops up in that.
He does.
He's a, you know.
I forgot he did play-by-play, to be honest with you.
He's used to doing major league stuff, and he
Right.
probably never really thought that some game in nowhere, Mississippi, that he called back in 1997
26 years, yeah.
would round
That's
its way
true.
back, but it did. But yeah, all those, and the old Jerry DiNardo press conferences were outstanding.
You read between the lines too. Not really. He was kind of put it out there. You know, he's Cecil's. We got to watch Cecil. We're not going to blow his head up because you didn't need to. Because Cecil's head was already.
Let's see if I can recount it in my head. See, I want Cecil to get better. See, you can write anything you want, okay? Like Herb wants me to nominate him for the SEC Player of the Week, which I don't do because I'm trying to make the kid better. Not that I don't love the kid. I love him to death. But,
Then you got to pound the desk, and he said one more thing.
yeah, but I want Cecil Collins to get better.
Yeah.
And
Which, and you know, I think Jerry kind of thought that they may have failed him to a bit, but you know, we talked to Marucci about this. They just didn't have
they weren't equipped.
They weren't equipped at that time to deal with somebody with Cecil. Cecil's going through something for sure. I still don't know what it is. I mean, Cecil would know, but they weren't ready for him.
Well, when you're a football player at that time, you're not supposed to be in your feelings, and you're not supposed to.
You're manly.
Man up.
Yep.
Be tough. Go to practice. Don't ask for water.
Right.
And they didn't have psychologists.
They were not. Yeah. No.
Things. Now, there's an old saying: you can lead a horse to water.
True.
You can shove its head underwater,
Well,
and it may not drink.
That goes to Cecil speaking to these kids. It's the same thing. They're young too. You could talk to them for days, but they want to mess up, they're gonna mess up. You know. Sometimes you do have to learn the hard way, which Cecil did.
The things that got Cecil in trouble on that campus, they're still there, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
So it's about decision making and you know, like Kevin Falk, you be a gentleman. You know, we don't talk to people that way. We don't do things that way. But
I think
Cecil said he didn't listen.
Kevin talked about social media, and not that back then either. That's a whole nother thing that we didn't have to deal with growing up.
There's some great things about that, but the negative, I just feel like, and we as media people, we use those great things, but I look every day and I'm like, man, I just feel like the negative on this thing is like 3-1 now, 4-1, between, you know, people comparing themselves to others, and I'm not as pretty as she is, or I'm not as popular as he is, or and then people, the negative things that are said to people online.
Because it's easy to do it behind a screen, you know. They're not saying that to somebody's face, you know.
I think it was Mike Tyson that said something about that. Y'all got way too comfortable saying stuff on the internet that they would never say. Like me, I just did a Mike Tyson impersonation.
They never would do that in front of him.
I would not do that to him.
Exactly.
I met him one time, just a random meeting, and it was 2007 in Phoenix, Arizona, at a golf course. I was in the little restaurant bar thing in the golf course, and I turned to look at the door, and there's some dude standing there with a tattoo on his face, a woman, and a couple of kids. I'm like, holy bleep, it's Mike Tyson. And
dude, I would have freaked out.
I walked over to him, and I said, hey, man, I just want to meet you. And I patted him on his shoulder, and it was like hitting his post right here. You know, he was like Iron Mike, still, you know, all these.
Well, how long did he serve in prison? It wasn't 13 years. Cecil served more than him, and his crime was a whole.
Yeah, have to look that up. I'm not sure.
I don't think it was that.
That's a great question. That was rape, wasn't it?
Yeah. Wasn't it Desiree Washington in the beauty pageant?
Yeah.
if I'm remember.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I mean, it's different states, different judges, you know, whatever, but still, it's,
Yeah. I'm sure there's some lawyer out there who's probably, you know, cursing us. Oh, of course he got 13
this
and a
is
half
exactly what he
because
should
of
have
X,
gotten.
Y, Z, you know?
Right, sure.
So I don't know, but it just, you know, common sense and just hearing about a guy who hits another guy with his car and is drunk and kills him and spends like 2 years in prison. You know, I don't know. Does the crime meet the punishment?
Yeah.
Punishment meet the crime. Well, as of today, just a day or 2.5 days or whatever after putting this out, it's close to 30,000 views on YouTube. Ain't a Joe Rogan podcast or anything, but it's putting up some big numbers and a lot of, and I would say really, and I'm not just saying because we made it, I'd say like 95% positive reaction to it.
It has. I was kind of surprised because we talked about it before. We're like, how do you think this is going to be received? I'm clueless. I don't know. Could go bad, could go good, just because of the
I dealt
what
with
has
this
surrounded
last night.
him.
I was at a quarterback club speaking, and towards the end I was like, look, we did this documentary. If you get a chance to check it out, I said it's called Cecil versus the Diesel. And out of the corner I heard this guy, like that, you know, like.
Mine's made up.
Right, exactly. Probably.
Mine's made up.
In 1999 or 2000 or whatever, the boogeyman, and I hadn't thought about him since. And so,
Right.
I just think, you know, life is short. So what do you want Cecil Collins to do at
Right.
this point? You want him to stay in his house
It's kind of my thing, yeah.
and just you know, pull the covers over his head and say I've screwed up? And I mean, he's still a relatively young man. He could live another 40, 50
For sure.
years and be a positive impact on people. I say that because we're almost exactly the same age. Cecil Collins is 2 days older than me, I believe.
Is it 2 days, really?
November the 19th. I was born on the 21st of 1976.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So I think
Go
that's
ahead.
correct. But
Yeah, I mean, I think he's doing the right thing. You know, just I'm glad he came out and talked about it, and hopefully it changed some people's minds about him. It doesn't forgive what happened, which, you know, but you're right. You got a whole life to live if he lives it the right way, which it looks like he's doing. I mean,
and
what else could you hope for?
There is a stigma when you see somebody who's been in prison. There's kind of you kind of recoil, or a lot of people do, and so I think that's what he wants to wash that off him. You know,
Yeah.
he wants to start a new career, so to speak, in life.
It goes back to what he said. He's like, when he sat down, I don't want to talk about that prison. I don't want to talk about that. I'm like, but that's the story.
We can't talk about you meeting
You're
your
here,
wife in
you're
prison
here, you're here.
until we tell. So,
Right. How did you meet your wife?
Yeah. And I'm sure maybe halfway through, he was like, oh, you know, probably having to relive some of that stuff. But what I told him all along, I said, Cecil, we're going to tell your story, but I'm going to promise you this. When it ends, a lot of people are going to have a new perspective on you. I promise you that.
Right.
And that's what we try to do. Once again, lay out a story, tell it objectively, interview people from both sides, not just a bunch of football players who were teammates of his.
Right.
But I think the football players were objective too, though.
They admitted
acknowledged that-
he got thrown off the team. Most of them said, I wasn't surprised. You know? And we heard some stories off the record, some of the stuff that kind of did, which he was being a man, so to speak, you know, but
Yeah.
you know, that's not how you treat women, and that's what Kevin said.
It's a lot different now, and for the better.
For sure. Yeah.
And I certainly don't want to be judged by who I was when I was 24 years old. I don't think you do either, much less,
No.
I mean, even 34. You know, it's progression. I think that's always the funny thing. You and I cover these teams, and some kid at a press conference maybe says something that he doesn't understand, and then there's people twice his age or older judging him and calling him immature and.
Well, I've said this before. I'm like, I put the camera in front of their face. I'm like, if I'm 17, there's no way, first off, I'm getting in front of that camera. And if I did, there ain't no telling what I was going to say. These kids are a whole lot more advanced than I would have been back then and what the stuff that they say, you know.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, that's what I always say. Can you imagine putting a camera in front of me and the stuff I would have said? You know, I would have been.
I would have probably
one and done on
stuttered.
the
Yeah,
interviews.
yeah, I would have been not good. They would have not bring me to player interviews back then.
DiNardo would have said, Duce, Daquano, you're done. That's it.
And I'd have been good.
Well, I think we've chatted a long time. Once again, if you missed it, Cecil versus the Diesel, the Cecil Collins story. Derron Daquano shot most of it. That's not, if it's not a Zoom interview, chances are he shot it in terms of the interviews.
Herb Vincent.
I shot Herb Vincent at SEC Media Days. That was the one. I think he appeared for 10 seconds or so in it. And then he edited the whole thing too. I didn't lay a single edit. I said, Derron, let me see what you got. No. Derron, let me see what you got. No. And then finally it was one day where it was like, he looked at me, he goes, and he handed me the headphones.
And so I went behind there. I don't know if you saw me. I'm looking at your face while you're watching it. I'm like, all right, it must be pretty good, because your face would light up and you were just completely engaged in the whole thing. I said, all right, I'm on the right. It's about 20 minutes. I said, all right, I'm on the right path.
The first 25 minutes of the day, I'm like, damn it, you shouldn't have shown me that. Now
and
I'm
then
going to concentrate the rest
he was like shot out of a cannon, because he's texted me. I'm like, okay, blah blah blah. We need to blah blah blah. It was like, oh man, he's going for it. I think we set a date before or after that. I don't remember.
I think that we had always
the date was set. Yeah, it was always Auburn. Yeah.
I said that it'd be perfect. It's funny because I wanted it to be the Auburn game of 2021 too. I was like, look, LSU's playing Auburn at home. And we weren't even.
Yeah, it wasn't even close. Had we even gotten him at that point? I don't think we had. No, because 22 we got him. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it was nowhere in the. It's funny because I told a few guys, and I'll say it's the One Team, One Podcast guys that we were working on Cecil Collins documentary, and then they checked back in. Hey, how's that coming? I'm like, it's not done. It's not okay. How's that coming? It reminded me of Family Guy. Brian the dog, he's writing a novel, right? But he never finishes it, like he never finishes anything. And Stewie's like, so Brian, how's that novel coming along? You got yourself a little protagonist? You got yourself a little plot? You got yourself a little challenge that the protagonist has to overcome? That reminded me of them checking. So Jacques, how's that Cecil Collins documentary? Right. So I was like, guys, look, I promise. I said we're gonna do it. I don't know when it's gonna be done, but we'll get it done. And,
it's like Dr. Dre's Detox. That still hadn't come out, right? Remember that? Everybody's...
Okay. The thing I remember was Guns N' Roses' Chinese Democracy. Axl Rose was working on it for like a decade before it came out. I don't even think I ever really even listened to it. I saw it in concert, and I think there's a few songs from that they perform live. But yeah, you can as they say, fall in love with it too, right? You can polish it to where it's too pristine, maybe.
You overthink things, but the main objective was to tell a complete story and represent him the right way, and not be too soft on him, be too hard on him. Just tell what happened, basically, and that's. I hope that came through.
Yeah, I think it did. Cecil versus the Diesel at YouTube, our WAFB YouTube page at WAFB.com. Derron Daquano is our very talented videographer and editor. He shoots all the LSU football games with me on the road, and will do so for the remainder of the season. And he's kind of like a superstar. We sign him to one-year contracts every year. And he's like, okay, I'll do it again. Okay, I'll do it again. So hopefully he does it for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Boss man.